Welcome to the Pre Nup, the wedding obsessed podcast designed to help you plan your dream day. I'm your host, Adriana, and each week I'm joined by the industry's top professionals, celebs, influencers, and friends who are sharing their best tips, advice, and mistakes they've made so you don't have to. The Pre Nup is a Love Stories TV podcast. From invitations to seating charts to menus and everything in between, today's guest creates stunning custom watercolor wedding stationery and signage that couples dream of. Her designs have been featured in both Brides and Style Me Pretty. Today, she's sitting down with us to share everything we need and some of the things that maybe we can skip, hidden costs, and unique ways to personalize your stationery, signage, and so much more. I'm thrilled to welcome the founder, creator, and designer of Cotton & Bow, Jamie Coast, to the Pre Nup. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here and talking about all things stationery.
Oh my gosh, we are thrilled to have you because it's so much information and it's a lot for brides to take in, and it starts pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to start at the beginning, at the top. Really, one of the first things we're going to get into is save the dates. That's kind of the setting stone for the wedding. It's going to really set the tone for what guests can expect. Like the first thing that's going to come into their sphere when it comes to your wedding. So what I want to know is, number one, when should we be sending these out?
So save the dates can be sent literally as soon as you sign with your venue.
Okay.
So as soon as you know the date, you have the venue locked in, you've paid your deposit, everything is good to go, you can send out save the dates. So there really isn't a too early to send them.
Okay.
So when you send them after that, if you don't send them right away, is really just up to you and how long of a engagement session you're kind of having. So you typically send them anywhere from 6 months to 12 months in advance.
Okay.
And that's usually just because your engagement is that long.
Yeah, exactly.
I planned my wedding in 7 months.
Wow.
And so, I sent save the dates as soon as I had the info to send out to people. It's really just to help your guests reserve that date on their calendar and hold that date on their calendar so that they don't accidentally book appointments. They don't accidentally book a vacation. With doctors and residents, this comes up a lot, especially because they have to request their time off way in advance. So with anyone who has that sort of schedule that has to request time off like as far in advance as possible, that's who that's for. That's why you send out a save the date.
I like the advice of like as soon as you sign, because especially if you're doing maybe something that's a destination wedding and people really have to make those plans, like the earlier, the better.
Absolutely.
As soon as we can find out. Okay, so this is a hot topic of conversation that kind of divides people and confuses them. What actually is supposed to go on the save the date?
Just the bare bones basic information. So obviously your names, and you'd be surprised some people forget you have to put your names on the save the dates.
You must put your name.
So people know what they're saving the date for.
Sure.
Usually an intro line of save the date for the wedding of something like that, or it could simply just say save the date.
Okay.
You want the date on there. And then I usually include the location. So it can be the country if it's a destination wedding, or it can be the city and state if it's local.
Okay.
And
so no venue.
You don't need to have the venue on there.
Okay.
You can if you want to. If
Yeah,
you
but
want
it's
to get people
customary
excited.
not to, right?
It's usually just the location. It's like, hey, it's going to be, Geneseo, New York, or hey, it's going to be in Tuscany, Italy, right? It's usually just like basic info.
Okay.
And then your wedding website, if you want to include your wedding website as well, if you have it ready to go. It doesn't need to be fully finished. Even if you just have like a page up there that just has a picture and more details to come, that's fine. You can then include your wedding website there. And then as you update the wedding website, people will be able to check back in.
Beautiful. Okay. So in my mind, from a planning perspective, I really like to have at least an idea of what the style of the wedding is going to be. Having the venue definitely helps with that because that dictates a lot of the style. But to me, it really is that first touchstone of like the welcome to the experience of our wedding. So I think it's important to be intentional about what your save the date looks like. To me, a black and white photo of you and your fiance kind of yells like, this is very modern, minimalistic, like that's
right.
the
Hotel or ballroom kind of setting.
For sure. So for people who are trying to decide maybe what to put on their save the date in terms of like either photos or you do this all the time, can you give us some ideas, recommendations?
Absolutely. So the photo is classic.
Okay.
You can't go wrong with just engagement photos or just a recent photo of you guys together.
Sure.
And then, the basic information we talked about, a nice clean font. That will really go with then whatever you decide to do for your wedding colors and your themes. And it's a classic for a reason because it's just so versatile. Mm-hmm. You can, if you know it's going to be at a really special destination or a really beautiful venue, do some sort of watercolor or artistic representation of the venue.
I love that.
For my Save the Dates, we did photography of like the wedding colors in different locations in upstate New York because we wanted to give that vibe. Yeah. We wanted to really capture the spirit of the destination and get people excited for the fact that it was going to be, outside of the city and in more of a rustic area.
And give them an idea of what to expect.
Exactly. Give, you're setting the tone, like you said, and really give people an expectation of, okay, how formal is this wedding going to be? What kind of wedding is it going to be? Where's it going to be? That sort of thing.
Okay, love it. So save the dates go out. Let's get to invitations. So I want to start with the ways that we can kind of customize our invitations first, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty logistics, things like that.
Definitely.
But you do custom watercolor, and your invites are so, so gorgeous. But there are different options that people can choose. So you can go fully custom, you can go semi-custom, and you can do ready to print.
Yes.
Can you explain the difference between the three?
Absolutely. So let's start with like a ready-made design or something that's ready to print. That's like our Minteds or Zolas, like the places that already have templates for you to pick from.
Okay.
You're just entering in your information. Maybe there's a little bit of customization, like you can upload a photo or you can choose a different image that's on the invite. That's, kind of your standard. And that is great for couples who see something they like right away, or they want to just prioritize other areas of their budget. It's super fast. You can get things out right away, and you can get something that matches pretty close to your theme.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the most streamlined, easy to do option. If you're not seeing what you like, you're, just looking through like hundreds of designs and you can't quite find the right thing, or you just want something that's a little bit less cookie cutter. You don't want to send out the same invitation that 5 of your other friends are sending out.
I see that a lot.
You want yours to, stand out a little bit on the fridge.
Sure.
Or you want to just kind of set a grander expectation. I do have a lot of couples who are like, no, I want to be that wedding. I want to be like the wedding of the season, not a wedding of the season. Not one of 7.
We love to say it.
Then you want to look at your semi-custom and your custom invitations and working with an actual stationery designer.
Okay.
One of the biggest pros of working with a stationery designer is you have someone you can call. It's an extra person on your vendor team. It's an extra person who's reviewing your proofs and making sure you didn't forget the date or forget to put your names on it.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. And so, having that level of service is just a huge boon to the entire process. And it's just someone you can call. Not a robot.
That is huge. And to your point, people run into issues all the time. I had a couple who signed me on to plan after they had already started a couple things. So they already had their venue and whatnot. But they had already sent out their save the dates and they ordered save the dates for each of their guests instead of each of their households.
Yes.
So when you do something like ready to print, there's not someone there holding your hand to tell you no, you only need about half of your guest list, things like that.
Exactly.
So, and there's so much more that goes into it, of course.
Etiquette and timing of the RSVPs and all that other stuff, which I know we'll get into.
So let's pop into it. So, okay, what actually goes into an invitation suite? So I'm sure people are familiar with getting a wedding invitation. You kind of open it up and there's all these little different cards and pamphlets and whatnot. So what are those things? What's the anatomy of an invitation?
Yes, absolutely. So you can go super basic and just send out an invitation that has, the key info and directs people to your website. Traditionally, invitation suite has 3 main pieces. So it has your invitation. It has what used to be a reception card, but is now kind of morphed into a details card. Mm-hmm. And then you have your RSVP card. So the invitation is your basic information. You're inviting somebody to the wedding. You're letting them know who's hosting the wedding, who it's for, the date, the time of the ceremony, dress code, if there's a specific dress code. And then how it used to be is traditionally you would have a ceremony at like a house of worship or some place, place one, and then you would have the reception at a different venue. And so you would traditionally just put the ceremony venue on your invitation, and then you'd have a separate reception card that would invite people to the second location.
Right.
And would give more details about the venue. That has become a little bit less common these days. Most couples are either having a wedding where everything's in the same place.
Yeah.
Or they're just putting the both locations on the invitation. And they're having lots of other events and lots of other information that they want to make sure guests are aware of. So they've kind of transformed that reception card into a details card. And it's more of like a catch-all card. You can include your wedding information, your wedding website, dress code if there's more specific dress code, like you have a color palette you want people to stick within, or a dress code that just needs an explanation. Like, some people will put something like tropical chic,
sure,
right? And so it's like, that might need a little bit more of an explanation since it's not just like black tie versus semi-formal.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you when it comes to things like those details that maybe need more information, that what's going to fit on an invitation or a small card, where on the invitation do we direct people to maybe our wedding website or somewhere that they're going to get that information?
Yes. So I would say usually my filter for the details card in particular is what goes on the details card versus what goes on the website is what would be a major travesty if they missed it.
Uh-huh.
So we had a couple of years ago that was getting married in Martha's Vineyard, and you had to make a very specific ferry in order to get to her wedding on time. If you missed this ferry, there were no more ferries that day, and you had to just, sit out the wedding, or you were going to be super late and figure out another way to get there.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a very popular weekend. So it was Labor Day weekend. You had to buy those ferry tickets in advance.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they were going to be sold out.
Yeah.
So that goes on the details card. Mm-hmm. That does not go on your wedding website, hidden on a page. Like, that goes on the details card. Make sure you don't miss the ferry, right? Give people a heads up. So things like that. Even something as simple as if you're having a welcome party the night before or you're having a brunch the day after, I say that goes on the details card as well if you have the information available when you're sending out your invitations, because you want people to know that they need to show up the day before, not the day of.
Got it.
Typically, if they're not local, even if they're traveling just, like more than an hour, which a lot of your guests are, giving them the heads up that there's going to be a welcome party on the Friday night so that they know to arrive on Friday or they know they need to take off from work, like things like that.
Yes.
Just give people a heads up that it's not just the day of the wedding that they need to clear their schedules for. It might be the day before or the day after as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to have a weekend of activities, especially as you said, if it's, something a little more destination. Typically, it's not just that ceremony and reception. There's like all these other pieces involved as well. Something that I notice trips people up a lot, and I think it gets overthought. I don't think it has to be as big of a deal as people make it. But we get one wedding, hopefully, and, we want to make sure that we're doing it as best we can. The wording of the invitation, I find, really trips people up. So there's a couple different ways that invitations are worded depending on who's hosting the wedding. But in a standard invitation, how should the anatomy of the wording go?
Absolutely. So people do get really tripped up by this. They get very defensive about it.
Yes.
Especially when I post reels about it on Instagram. They get
I'm
very
sure
upset.
they love that.
So there is some nuance, but it doesn't have to be that complicated and it doesn't have to stress you out. It's really about understanding what the different lines are for.
Okay.
So the first line of the invitation is your host line. If you were throwing me a birthday party, you would send out some sort of email or invitation. You'd say, hey, this is Adriana. I'm throwing Jamie a birthday party.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
You're the host. Your name is on it.
Yes.
Or it's coming from your email address, so it's very clear.
Yes.
So if you're sending out an invitation and your parents are hosting this beautiful wedding for you, the parents are going to be named on it because they're the ones who are hosting the wedding.
Sure.
So people get very upset and conflicted about that line in particular.
Yes.
Because it's about who's paying for the wedding. It's about who's hosting the wedding. And so again, traditionally, this was usually the bride's parents were hosting this wonderful event to celebrate for their daughter. Or it was a combined effort where both sets of parents, were hosting it for their daughter and their son, together. And so they would be named on the invitation. More frequently now, it's some sort of combination of multiple people are funding it and hosting it. And so it's much more common for folks to say, together with their families instead of naming their parents or naming, multiple step parents and, it just getting very complicated.
Sure.
So I love the wording together with their families. That's a pretty standard default to fall back on. Nobody's going to get upset about that. And it just reflects the reality of the situation that so many couples are in, which is just that there's help even if it's not financial help, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, your parents are there, your families are there, even if it's not a traditional parent situation. There's just so many people that you want to thank for their contribution and their support of your marriage.
Yes.
So that's the key to the host line is really just about who's helping, who's hosting.
Yeah. I think people get so they think about it so much and are so intentional with it because the host or hosts maybe can be a little bit precious about how their name is on the invitation or who else's name is on the invitation. So just, to give an example, I'll be gauche for a minute and I'll just explain the way my wedding went. My parents paid for most of my wedding to my husband, Jake. What's up, Jake? And his parents paid for honeymoon and for rehearsal dinner. And then we paid for a couple little things, but majority was my parents. So the actual wedding invitation read, my parents' names, Jamie and Wendy, invite you to the wedding of their daughter, Adriana, to Jake, son of, and it was still important that for my parents that Jake's parents were named on the invitation just as an honor to them because some of their friends were invited to the wedding. So if you are a person who has parents contributing and they're inviting friends or coworkers or what have you, it is important for names to be on there for them as well because they might get this invitation and be who the hell is Adriana and Jay? Who are these people?
Yes. That's
so
an
that
important point as well.
Confusing. But yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, but I love the together with their families because it's so much more indicative of the modern state of where weddings are and how people are putting weddings on. And it is more of a collaborative effort. And my advice to anyone who is giving assistance is remember who it's about and maybe try not to be as precious about the way it's worded. You're still getting your nod, or you should, I think. I think it should still be on there if you're a partial host. But just, try to not make it so difficult on the couple because they're doing their best.
Yes, definitely. It indicates tone to your point, right? Which is if you're having a very formal affair, you're inviting, your parents are inviting their coworkers or business partners, right? The wording is going to, by default, be more formal and more traditional versus if you're having more of a modern, more casual affair. I think, together with their families is a bit of a catch-all if you're not sure if your event is really that formal. I think if your event is that formal, you know it.
For sure. Oh, yeah.
There
will be signs.
And you are contacting a stationery designer and your planner to be help me word this so that I don't offend anybody.
Exactly. If all else fails, seek out help. Your stationery person can help you with that. Let's get to the fun stuff, the actual design of the invites. So we're in 2025 now, and we're seeing definitely some changes happen in the wedding industry. What are some predictions that you have for wedding invitation design, or what are some things that you're seeing that you're just absolutely loving?
Absolutely. So fun shapes are a big trend. People are really loving doing a little wavy cut details card or a circle for the RSVP card. The arch shapes are not as like popular, but they're still there. People are using the arch shaped invitations. But there's all these like very funky, like cool shapes now that people are playing with that I absolutely love. You can even go like super custom and do like the shape of a butterfly or the shape of your home state.
Cute.
You know, you can do the shape of a buffalo if you're getting married in Buffalo, right? Like there's all these ways to really play with the shape of the invitation. That add, you know, just more personality.
Yeah.
Texture is also a really big thing, and doing like more sculptural elements.
Yeah. What about like embossing and letterpressing?
Exactly. So letterpress and embossing to add that like depth and like physical touch element to your invitation are always really impressive.
Question for you. What is the difference between letterpress and emboss?
Yes. So there is a traditional print technique called letterpress, and it is essentially this giant machine. They're usually from like the 1800s or the 1700s still.
So fun.
And it's how they used to do all printing, you know, before we had computers and home printers.
Sure.
Where you make a physical plate. It used to be metal, but often now it's like a polymer plate that they create, and that's for each ink color. And so they actually make a plate for every single ink color, even ones that have no ink at all and are just like impressed into the paper. So they will make these plates, and then they will put the ink on this giant roller, and they will insert your paper, and they will literally press it onto the paper, the ink. And so that creates more of an impression like deep into the paper.
Okay.
What's really funny is the way that couples have influenced these very like ancient print techniques, because what's actually preferred by letterpress artisans is to leave no impression at all, that there should just be a slight kiss of the paper and it should just look like regular printing. But because that just looks like flat printing, like that doesn't look very special.
Sure.
Brides and grooms have actually like influenced these letterpress artisans to like really just smash those plates into the paper to create this like really thick, juicy, like pillowy impression. So you can definitely tell when you go the letterpress route. As you can imagine, the amount of labor that's involved with like a physical person, like cranking this machine.
Yeah,
and,
what does something like that run you?
It's a lot more expensive.
Okay.
One, because of labor, but two, because of the number of plates that you need to create. So like one plate is going to set you back like $250.
Woof.
And so you need one of those for every single color, every single page. So if you're having you know, just an invitation with like all of your text in one color, and then you want like a flower that's, you know, like clear but just has the texture, those are 2 plates. Then your details card has a 3rd plate. Then your RSVP card has a 4th plate, right? So you're talking about already $1,000 and you haven't paid for anything yet. You just paid for the creation of those plates.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah.
So it's usually several $1,000s. Usually it's, you know, $5,000 plus for like a traditional suite with over 100 invitations.
Say that one more time.
Usually it's about $5,000 plus.
Okay.
If you're talking, you know, 100 invitation suites and you're talking all 3 pieces are letterpress.
Okay. Okay.
There are ways to do it, you know, less expensively. There are semi-custom options, for example, where there's either, you know, embossing, which is when it's raised. So it's actually being pressed from the back instead of from the front.
Okay.
And typically doesn't have ink. It's really just about that texture on the front. And then you can have the rest of it digitally printed, right? So that's a way to like add that texture, and you don't need to pay for the plate because someone has created the plate already. It has a flower on it or it has a border. And then you're just having the labor of like the texture actually being added. So that's one of those ways that you can get the look for a little bit less.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like that. All right. We're getting the tips today. Okay. So we're talking about pricing a little bit and, you know, invitations. What would you say from a range from like your most basic ready to print to something like you do, like a custom watercolor invitation per invitation, would you say?
Absolutely. So per invitation is a little bit tough just because if you're going the ready to print route, you can absolutely do a per invitation cost of like $2 to $3 per invitation. Once you get a person involved, you're paying for a design fee.
Yes.
So there is like an upfront design fee. And so your printing costs are actually not that different, but you're paying a lot for design.
Okay.
And so you might look at it and go, okay, well, if I'm paying $3,000 and, I'm only getting so many invitations printed, that could be anywhere from $40 an invitation to, it's only $3 an invitation, right? So once you start to involve a person, the like per invitation cost like gets a little bit muddy, because if you're only sending a few invitations, you're paying like kind of an outrageous amount per invitation.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes total sense.
When in reality, the printing costs are about the same.
Pretty similar.
No matter where you go, it's the design cost that has this like more of an upfront fee.
Okay.
So what I usually tell people is, if you look at your budget, if you have less than $500, let's say, if you're trying to stay around the average cost, you should not be going to a person. You should be going to like a Minted or someplace where you can find ready designed invitations, or you should do some sort of DIY like at home. Yeah. So that's the like under $500. That's where you should be looking.
Okay.
Once you have a budget of like $500 to $1,000, I would still say like go to like a Minted, but then you can afford some of the like fancier things. So you can afford letterpress. You might be able to afford a venue illustration. You could maybe talk to an illustrator about getting just your venue illustrated or getting a crest made and then using it on one of these more like DIY options.
So that's more of like the semi-custom, you would say?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I would say at $1,000 plus is when you can really involve a person to do all of your design work.
Okay.
So usually you're in the range of, if you're sending 100 invitation suites, you're usually in like the $2,000 to like $4,000, depending on whether you're doing semi-custom or you're doing like custom.
Yeah.
Once you have a budget of like $5,000 plus is when you can really go nuts, and you can do like the triple thick paper with foiled edges and letterpress and embossing and multiple plates and like really go nuts.
The fun stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Love it. Okay. That's really, really helpful to people because, cost and price, it's just like one of those things where when it comes to weddings, it just keeps coming at you and you feel like you're dodging these prices as they come. But I think it's important to be transparent rather than like hidden costs. But
you see things on, on Pinterest, Instagram, from celebrities. And those things are not always like reasonable for the average person. Like that's not the stuff I was doing for my wedding.
Sure.
I did make my own invitations. So I was, a DIY
you are kind of an expert.
bride. But those were my first invitations that I ever made.
Were they really?
Yes. Aww. And then I made my sisters, and then, things just got out of hand from there.
For sure, as they do. So speaking of just like hidden costs of things, what are some, I would say, not so hidden, but unexpected costs that people can or should expect to incur when it comes to sending out their invites?
People forget about the postage part of it is like really what happens. And it's not that it's super expensive. It's just that it's a thing you forget to think about. Yes. And postage is not cheap anymore, right? No. It's almost $1 like per invitation to send these things out for one stamp. So, and
you have to weigh and see what it actually needs. It's not just like a standard forever stamp or, and your postage for the RSVP.
Mm-hmm. So I would say, taking a look at the postage and making sure you have a couple $100 for just postage reserved in your budget so that it doesn't surprise you. You're going to need probably one forever stamp, which is about 73 cents today, for a save the date, because it's usually just one piece of paper in an envelope. For invitations, you're usually going to need either a 2-ounce stamp or 2 forever stamps, right? So now you're getting over $1 like per invitation.
Okay.
And then the RSVP is also going to need its own like one forever stamp.
Sure.
Then when you start to add things like wax seals, double thick paper, square shaped invitations, like things that are just not standard, things that are larger or things that are like smaller than the normal, wax seals, ribbon, like things that start to just get heavy or bulky, then you're going to need to spend even more. And so that's when you need to really take it to the post office and have them weigh it for you.
Yes.
And make sure it fits through the slot and that it's not too rigid. Otherwise, it's not going to go through the machines very well. And usually people give the hack of like, oh, pay for, hand canceling and pay to have them be non-machinable.
Yeah.
And the truth is that only guarantees that they will not be put through the machine at the first post office that you drop it off at, not at each subsequent post office that it goes to on its journey throughout the United States or through the world.
So how do we keep our delicate, beautiful invitations that we spend so much money on from getting damaged in the mail?
So the first way is just to not add anything that's going to be super bulky on the inside or lumpy. Like lumpy things generally do not mail well. So doing a wax seal, for example, on the outside of the envelope, it's never gonna mail well.
Yeah.
Some of them might be okay, but what's going to happen is somebody who is lazy and just wants to get their job done because they have thousands of pieces of mail to put through a little slot.
Yes.
Is just going to shove it through the slot.
Yes.
And they're going to get ripped open. And then, so like just avoiding those things is helpful. If you want to do those things, I would say to put it in an outer envelope.
Okay.
So you have your inner envelope with everything in it. That's your pristine, beautiful, gorgeous envelope. If you have calligraphy or vintage stamps or anything, you're going to want it on the inner envelope.
Yes.
Then you put an outer envelope on the outside. That's your packaging, right? This is okay if it gets dirty. This is okay if it gets, a red line written on it by the post office. Like that's going to happen.
Makes sense.
The really, really foolproof way is to put things into a box or into a cello sleeve or into a mailing envelope.
Okay.
Like one of those flat white envelopes.
Sure.
And mail it that way with trackable postage.
Okay.
It does cost significantly more, right? It's going to cost you like $3 to $4 potentially per invitation that's sent.
Okay.
But it's completely trackable, so you know exactly who has gotten their invitation and who hasn't. And I highly recommend that for destination invitations these days. So if you're sending things to other countries, even if it's just to Canada or Mexico,
yes,
I'm telling brides to like skip the stamp these days and go with the actual envelope and like tracking it and going through like either UPS or DHL.
Oh yeah. And it can be awkward because if you don't track it, then you're not sure who didn't get it. And there are going to be people who don't get it. Like our mailing system is not perfect.
Yes.
And then couples, when they're getting married, they have so much to do and they start getting like frustrated. This person didn't RSVP. It's like, well, maybe they didn't get it. So having that tracking is a huge piece.
Yes. And understanding that it might, even if everything's going really well and nothing's wrong, it might take 3 weeks to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is just a thing that happens. It's sitting in a hub somewhere that got overloaded with lots of mail and they just haven't had a chance to get it out of that hub, wherever it is.
And that's something to account for too. So like, okay, this piece of mail could potentially take 3 weeks to get to the person. You want to give them I like to say anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks for an invitation, depending on what kind of wedding it is. And then you want to give yourself time for that design piece as well. So how early are we actually going to our stationery specialist and starting to get these things sorted?
Yes. So if you start 6 months before your wedding, I think that's a good benchmark.
Okay.
You can start design with your stationery person or, like order them. That gives you 3 months of design time. Mm-hmm. So that's enough for letterpress and things like that.
Okay.
So then you're sending them out 3 months in advance. And asking for RSVPs, 6 to 8 weeks in advance. So you're giving yourself just loads of time, which is such a luxury to have.
It's the best luxury.
To follow up with people and collect those RSVPs, to do all of the fun day of stationery pieces that you want to do. Like if you want to do cocktail napkins or you want to do some sort of signature cocktail sign or fun place card, you're getting those RSVPs in early enough that you have a better idea of how many people you're going to need to purchase those things for. You can personalize them with people's names then. So it just gives you a lot more time. I'm not a fan of sending out wedding invitations 6 to 8 weeks in advance anymore. I'm really telling people like send them like 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
And if you're having a destination wedding, it's more like 4 to 5 months.
Yeah. Okay. Love it. And as far as RSVPs go, definitely coming into more popularity is the digital RSVP.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm seeing 50-50 these days. Half my couples are doing the digital RSVP. The other half are doing the traditional mailback RSVP. And so I usually get this question.
Yeah.
And my response is, there are some pros and cons of each one. So the pros of doing the online RSVP is it's faster. Mm-hmm. It's easier to track. It does save you a little bit of money because it saves you a stamp.
Sure.
And, people are used to doing it. So those are all the pros. I think if you just want the easiest option, do the online RSVP. You can add a little QR code. You can add the website URL at the bottom. And that's plenty of information. And, people are used to doing it now. So your guests know how to do it. If you have like a grandma or an aunt or something who, is a little bit technologically challenged, just, you can call them up. Somebody will help. We'll walk them through it. They will call you and say, I don't know how to do this. Just record my RSVP.
Yes.
But at least that's, a handful of RSVPs you have to record in your system versus when you do the traditional option, you have to record every single one that comes back.
Right.
The mailback RSVP card is, if you want that experience, it's like very sentimental. Mm-hmm. It's very traditional. It's very formal. You won't ever have an event that's this big and this formal in your life again.
Right.
This is the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
So if you want to do it because it just feels fun to do, and that's like, this is your only chance.
Yes.
And that's what couples regret so often after their weddings is like the things that they didn't do, the things that they were like, oh, I didn't do that because I didn't want to spend the money, or I wasn't sure, or it's always those things that, money always comes back to you. When you're looking at it, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, you're not going to remember the fact that you had like a little bit less in your bank account. Because you'll have it back in your bank account by that point.
Sure, exactly. Yeah.
Not to be reckless or anything like that.
Of course.
You will regret the things like, I didn't hire a videographer for my wedding. And so I'm like, I should have just spent the extra couple $1,000s on a videographer.
Right.
It would not have affected my life today.
Yeah.
Negatively in any way at all to have done that, right? To spend that extra little bit of money.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you on that for sure. When it comes to the RSVPs, I love that. Like, I don't want to call it nostalgic, but it's so rare that we get anything in the mail that's not like a bill or something annoying. So anytime I receive a piece of mail, I'm so excited. And when it comes to your wedding and you're getting those RSVPs come in, like, it's just another point of excitement. I like doing both. I like the digital RSVP. I like give people the option and, you just have it in a spreadsheet and you upload it that way. Actually, one of my girlfriends, when she was getting married, she did a digital RSVP. Mm-hmm. And when it came in, when you scan the QR, it was taking you to the wrong website. And it wasn't her fault.
Gosh.
It was a glitch in the site that she used. And I called her and was like, this is like, we got to change this. She's like, no, I checked 100 times. She looked, she was like, oh my God. She ended up getting it fixed. But like anything can happen with those kinds of things. So even if you're doing digital, it's not foolproof. Like,
no, put the website on the bottom, check the URL before it goes.
Yes.
I have like a very specific print checklist that I go through both before I send things into production and then before I pack them up to mail them or ship them to my couples. And one of those things is check the QR code. The other one is check the website, make sure everything's working. You also want to be careful if you're using a QR code generator from one of those like free QR code websites because a lot of them are free for like 30 days. Oh. And then they start charging you a monthly fee if you want to keep it active. And professional designers don't use those at all. Like our software tools are capable of generating a QR code that never expires.
Got it.
So we don't need to go through those like weird third-party websites to create them. Like we just avoid that entirely. I'm creating like a custom QR code that is just, it will work forever as long as the URL doesn't change.
Okay.
But if you're doing it on your own, you're going through a third-party website, make sure you check that they're not going to charge you a fee every month that you need to keep it active because that surprises folks
I'm
often.
Sure. Yeah. Unexpected costs. Come on. Okay. That's a really good one. So what about other stationery items like our signage? I hear this debate a lot too. What's your take on a wedding program? Do we need it? Do we not need it?
I think you need it if your ceremony location and your reception location are not the same.
Okay.
So that's like number one, you need it in that scenario. I have been to weddings where the locations are not the same. There was maybe a gap, or maybe like you had to show up to a certain location to get a bus to the next location. And like, if you don't have a program to communicate that information and you're relying on your bridesmaids or something, it's chaos for your guests. And so if at any point you're like telling people go from one place to another, or if there's like a gap and you want to give people ideas of what to do in that gap so they don't just show up at the reception 2 hours early, that's really why you would want a program.
Okay.
I think the other scenario to have a program is if you want to introduce people to your culture that are maybe not familiar with it.
Yeah.
So if you're having, a church wedding and, most of your family or, your fiance's family is not of that religion, having like a nice ceremony program to kind of guide them through what to expect is definitely very helpful.
Okay. Wonderful. And then last thing I want to ask you about is basically just like things like our signage and, our menus and table numbers and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they can feel a little bit cookie cutter. Do you have any recommendations for couples to personalize, maybe customize those kinds of things so they stand out a little bit more?
Yes, absolutely. So on my website, if you go to cottonandbow.com/checklist, I have a full checklist you can download that has everything like beyond just the basics. So from your save the dates to your invitations to your day of, all of the different opportunities for signage and paper goods. Uh-huh. So you can really go through that and get ideas for different things that are a little bit out of the box and fun and unique and ways to add personality. I love a good pet portrait as a way to add a personality to your different signage or cocktail napkins. I love looking into your hobbies, what things drew you together as a couple. Like, how can you really tell your love story? So, having a sign that doubles as a crossword if you guys do the crossword together every morning.
Cute.
Or, having something that incorporates, a favorite sports team that you guys have together. Things like that really just make your wedding feel like it's not just a wedding factory, right? Where you're going to wedding after wedding after wedding. They all start to blend together and feel the same.
Yes.
Anything you can do to give that like touch point of like, this is about us. This is about our story and our friends and our family really does just help people create a long-lasting and permanent memory as opposed to having fun in the moment and then immediately forgetting everything that happened.
Those are the little details are really what sticks with people as opposed to just like, oh yeah, the food was good, the music was good, we danced, we enjoyed ourselves. Mm-hmm. Those little personalization pieces go such a long way. And they might seem like a frivolous detail. And I hear so many people say like, no one's going to notice the color of the napkins or this and that. But when you've been so intentional about the texture and the way they've laid and different folds and like, no, people do notice that thing. They might not notice it itself, but it's the overall feel. So when you've incorporated yourself into those little details, like, your table numbers or whatever, people do feel that.
There's actually a neuroscience principle that I'm going to totally butcher because I'm not a scientist. But,
oh, yeah, tell us.
It's about novelty and the idea that if you do something that's outside of your routine and that's different, it's going to stick in your brain and create like this really like core, strong memory in a way that just, if you don't do the different thing, if you don't take that like novel approach, your days are just going to blend together, right? So, you go to a lot of weddings in your 20s and your 30s. And if you want your wedding to really stand out in your guest memory, but also in your own, right? Like, create those sort of like novelty pieces. It's not just like, oh, I'm just doing a frivolous thing because I want to. It's like, no, I'm actually like creating and deepening these like neural connections in my brain.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yes.
When you think about it that way, it's like,
very important.
I'm doing this for science. Exactly. It's not a part of the budget. It's truly for science. Okay, Jamie, every episode we do something called premarital counseling. So one of our listeners will write in. We always keep it anonymous and we just try to help them sort through whatever issue they're dealing with. Will you help us today?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. So just for listeners to know, you can write in submissions to Adriana at the-pre-nup.com or podcasts at lovestoriestv.com. And we always keep it anonymous. We always change names. This one, we're going to call her Becca today. All right. She says, "Hi, Adriana and guest. And Jamie. I'm a 2025 bride who absolutely loves the prenup. I feel like I have a community of brides to align with, and I'm so thankful for all the information you share." Oh, thank you. Here's my question. My wedding is happening this summer in Italy. Eek. I sent save the dates out almost a year ago, and some guests kindly let me know that they would not be able to make the trip. My question is, do I still have to send those guests invitations? My mom says yes, it's the right thing to do. I say it's awkward and a waste of money. What should I do in this situation? XO, Becca.
So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
You should send the invitations out.
Okay, tell us why.
There are a few reasons for that. One is just it's polite, right? So like your mom is right. It's polite thing to do. And if you want to be a polite person, that is the polite thing to do. They got to save the date. They're expecting an invitation because that's what the save the date creates, right? It's that expectation that an invitation is to follow.
Right.
And so that's the polite thing to do. The other practical reason is one, people change plans. They may have said they initially can't do it, but then once they get the invitation, they decide that they can. A save the date is not meant to elicit an RSVP response. So things may have changed. So you should still send the invitations. The other practical reason for you to send it is that might remind them that they wanted to send you a gift. Yeah. And then they can check out your website. They can see if you have a registry listed on your website. And then that just reminds them when to send the gift if they were planning on sending the gift. So it's not a gift grab, but it is just like a friendly reminder if someone was planning on doing it. They might have gotten rid of the save the date. But totally. Because I would do that as soon as I get the invitation. Oh gosh, I meant to send them a gift. Now I can go see what's on their registry. I can send them a gift. So
I hadn't thought of that.
That's the practical reason. If you're looking for a compromise, the compromise reason, the compromise is if they're over 35, call them, give them a phone call, and tell them you're sending out your invitations, how wedding planning is going, and ask them if, they would like to receive an invitation, right? Yes. That's kind of the compromise.
I like that.
If they're under 35, you can text them.
Yeah. And you know what? That puts to bed the whole thing and also gives them that reminder. And we live in the digital age, the modern world, especially if it's someone that you talk to pretty frequently. You can give them a call or shoot them a text and be like, listen, I remember you said that you wouldn't be able to make it and I didn't want to put pressure on you. I am sending out invitations. They might be like, oh my gosh, no, don't waste the money and the postage on me. Yes. We're not going to be able to make it. Or they might say I
really want to see what they look like. And I still want to be a part of the experience, especially because I can't go to your wedding.
Yes. And especially if they are not going to the wedding and they're giving you a gift, they do deserve to have that kind of keepsake and be in a part of the loop and all that. And if they technically weren't invited to your wedding, then they're technically don't have to give, no one has to give anyone a gift. But the whole gift piece is an interesting factor of this. It's something to consider for sure.
Yes, especially if you're like, oh, well, it saves money if I don't send them. It's like, well, that might actually cost you some gifts.
Exactly. Okay. Good point. I like that advice, Jamie. Okay, last thing that we are going to do today is our after party, and this is just some fun wedding rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Go for it.
Question number 1, what is your honeymoon hotspot?
Italy. It's where I had my honeymoon, so it has just a
where
special
in Italy?
Place in my heart. We did Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast. We did Amalfi and Ravello, which was a good mix because we did museums and touristy things. We were out every day, all day for the first half of our honeymoon, and then the second half was more relax on the beach, and relax by the pool, and just take in the beautiful scenery. So we got kind of the best of both worlds, where it felt like a trip and, touristy and, fun. But then it also felt restful after all of wedding planning.
Which Lord knows we need.
Yes.
Okay. Question number 2, what song will get you on the dance floor at a wedding?
Mr. Brightside. This is such a stereotypical white girl from Long Island answer.
It's so good.
But I just love that song.
It's a bop. There's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is. Like it or not, your ass is on the dance floor, Mr. Brightside. Like, don't kid yourself.
And singing the lyrics like top volume, just like shouting them is just every time.
Yes, you're going to end up sweaty, for better or worse.
It's a good time.
It is a good time. Okay, what hors d'oeuvre will you never pass up at a wedding?
Pigs in a blanket.
Oh, same, girl.
Especially if they're like pretzel like bun with a little hot dog and spicy mustard.
Oh, I'm so hungry.
They're usually like a fancy version.
Yes. You cannot go wrong. What is your signature cocktail or mocktail?
So this is such a like pro tip is I do a white wine spritz.
Uh-huh.
So you can drink like 10 of them, especially if you like tell the bartender like, hey, I want like this much wine and like that much seltzer. So it gets you like, if you're a wine drinker, it like still tastes like wine.
Sure.
But like I said, you can drink like 10 of them and
love
not feel anything at all.
Okay. Love that so much. Yeah. That is a really hot
And
tip.
then you're very hydrated by the end of the night.
Exactly. You're still, and I think so much of like drinking is just having that drink in your hand. So you don't necessarily need to get
and the taste. And it's like, what's so fun is like you want one, right? You want like a little bit of a buzz and like to get in the mood of like partying and let loose a little bit. But then you get like, because it's like a long event and like maybe there's multiple days worth of events, like it can just be a little bit exhausting, but also like hard to pass up the next like opportunities for drinks. And so I like to do just like a low ABV.
Pace yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Okay, great advice. If you could invite any living dream guest to your wedding, who would it be?
Taylor Swift. I'm such a Swiftie. And I think she would be so fun at a wedding.
I think she would be really fun. I think she would be a party girl at a wedding for sure. A hype girl. All right, Jamie, last question I have for you. One practical piece of advice you could give to any bride planning her wedding.
I would say to enjoy the process, figure out ways to enjoy the journey as much as the destination. This is such a wonderful time in your marriage, before you have kids, maybe even before you buy a house. That should just be really fun and should be about like creating wonderful memories together. So definitely just enjoy it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Jamie, thank you so much for doing this. Where can everyone find you and Cotton and Bows?
Absolutely. So you can find me at cottonandbow.com and you can find me on Instagram at cottonandbowpaper.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is so informative.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was such a wonderful conversation.
Oh, it was. Yay. Thanks for tuning into the Pre Nup. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform or on the Love Stories TV YouTube channel. Follow at @the_pre_nup and at Love Stories TV on Instagram for more. Have feedback or suggestions for the next episode? Feel free to reach out to us at podcast@lovestoriestv.com.